December 16th, 1942. 2 in the morning. A flat black fen north of Cambridge. A parachute opens 500 meters above frozen ground. The man underneath it is 28 years old. He is carrying a Mauser pistol with 12 rounds, 2,000 pounds in used £5 notes, a radio set wrapped in oilskin, a fake British identity card in the name of George Clark, and one cyanide capsule sewn into the lining of his right cuff. He hits the ground wrong, crashes through a hawthorn hedge, loses 2 front teeth on the heel of his own boot as he tumbles. He stands up, brushes mud out of his eyes, walks toward the only light he can see across the field. A farmhouse near Apes Hall, west of Littleport. He bangs on the door at 3 in the morning, smiles at the farmer in slippers, and asks to use the telephone. He has to call the police. He has just dropped out of the sky. He is a German spy. That is the second thing he will say to anyone in England that night. Within 12 hours, his name will be in front of British intelligence at an MI5 interrogation centre on Ham Common, on the southern edge of London. Within 24, he will be writing his first radio message back to Berlin under the close watch of 2 MI5 case officers. Within 7 days, German intelligence will believe they have just inserted their best agent into wartime Britain. The Abwehr will be right about him on exactly one point. He is a brilliant man. Everything else they think they know is about to become a lie. For the next 26 months, this man will feed Berlin 312 radio transmissions. 311 of them will be carefully crafted half-truths. One of them will be a deliberate, surgical falsehood. A single sentence about the impact point of Hitler's vengeance weapon. And that one sentence will, in the estimation of British wartime intelligence, save somewhere between several hundred and several thousand Londoners from being killed in their kitchens. This is the story of Edward Arnold Chapman, codename Fritzchen in Berlin, codename Zigzag in London, the only known British civilian ever decorated with a German Iron Cross, the most successful double agent of the Second World War, and before any of that, a teenage deserter who learned his trade blowing open the safes of suburban cinemas. How did a Soho safecracker end up as Adolf Hitler's personal favorite spy in England? And why, when he had a German cash account, a German girlfriend, and an Iron Cross waiting for him in Paris, did he keep parachuting back into a country that would have hanged him as a traitor if it ever found out who paid him second? To answer that, the camera has to swing away from this Cambridgeshire field. 8 years earlier. London, 1934. A skinny young deserter from the Coldstream Guards is on the run, and the only thing he is good at is something the British Army taught him by accident. Edward Chapman was born in 1914 in Burnopfield, County Durham. His father drank his shipyard wages. His mother fed 5 children on what was left. Eddie left school at 14, joined the army at 17 because the queue for hot food was shorter at the recruiting office than at the soup kitchen, and walked out of Caterham Barracks before his 19th birthday with another man's weekend pass folded inside his cap. He did not go home. He went to Soho. What Soho taught him is the spine of every choice he will make in the next decade. He learns to dance. He learns to dress. He learns to lie in 3 different accents inside the same conversation. He works as a film extra at Elstree for £0.50 a day. He works as a masseur for a Polish woman in Frith Street who paid him in cash and old jewellery. He works as a wrestler at the Lambs Club in Crouch End for a guinea a fight. None of that pays. The thing that pays is safes. By the autumn of 1935, he is part of a London gang the papers will later call the Jelly Boys. The job is simple to describe and very hard to do. A safe is a steel box with a lock somebody else has poured concrete around. Inside is somebody else's money. The Jelly Boys open the box with a stick of gelignite, 2 electric detonators, a roll of sticking tape, and a wad of damp newspaper to muffle the bang. Pack the charge wrong, and the door blows across the room and takes the money with it. Pack it right, and the door swings open like an oven on a Sunday lunch. Eddie Chapman has the hands for it. He has something rarer. He has the nerve. While other men in the gang flinch on the second crack of the casing, Eddie counts the seconds between the wad of explosive going in and the wave of pressure coming out, and he learns gelignite the way another man might learn a violin, by the way the brick wall hums after the blast has passed through it. He keeps a private notebook of combinations he has overheard managers mutter to themselves through office doors. He never writes down a face. He memorizes every face he has worked with. It is the same gift that will let him 4 years later recite the entire opening section of an Abwehr cipher table from a single afternoon's look at the German radio operator's notebook. Crime is teaching him a trade that British intelligence will, by accident, find priceless. He does not know that yet. Right now, he is 21 years old. He and the boys have just blown the safe of the Edgware Road Odeon. The next morning's papers say they took £600. The actual sum is closer to 900. The Jelly Boys keep the rest off the books because they distrust the newspapers slightly less than they distrust each other. By the spring of 1938, Eddie's name is on a wanted list in 14 English counties. He decides Scotland is too cold and Ireland is too small, and he flees to the only island he thinks the Yard cannot easily reach across the water: Jersey. This is the detail Berlin will pick up by accident 4 years later. Jersey, a small place, not yet German. On a wet evening in early 1939, Eddie Chapman blows a St. Helier hotel safe. The records disagree on which one. The local police catch him climbing back out through a kitchen window. He has £15, a packet of players, and a length of fuse wire in his trouser pocket. He pleads guilty. He gets 2 years in His Majesty's Prison, Jersey. He is sentenced on the 11th of March, 1939, and starts his 2 years that week. By the summer of 1940, the Germans have walked into the Channel Islands. The Union Jack has come down off the prison flagpole. The prison Eddie is sitting in is now under the supervision of a Wehrmacht major who has never met an Englishman he could not work with. By August, his rations have been halved, his blanket has been taken away, and a guard, who did not like one of his jokes, has knocked 4 more teeth out of his head with a rifle butt. Sources later disagree on exactly how much weight he lost that first winter. The Jersey prison ration card on file at Kew lists £14 gone in 6 months. Eddie's own account, written in the 1950s, calls it closer to 2.5 stone. Take the average. It does not change the shape of what came next. The British government has effectively forgotten him. The Germans now own his cell. He has 13 months left on his sentence. He is 26 years old. He has nothing to lose and nothing to bargain with, except the one thing the men running his prison happen to need. A British criminal who knows London inside and out. He writes a letter, 8 words, on the front of a folded prison-issue sheet. Ich bin bereit für Deutschland zu arbeiten. I am ready to work for Germany. He pushes it under the door of the duty office at Lights Out. The commandant reads it the next morning, then files it, then reads it again 3 weeks later, then folds it inside a brown envelope and forwards it up the chain to a quiet station house outside Nantes in occupied France, where a fat, drunk, very intelligent man named Dr. Stefan von Groening is sitting at a wooden desk reading recruit files and looking for one English face he can build a long-range agent around. Von Groening will save Eddie Chapman's life by giving him a job that should, by every reasonable law of espionage, end it. By the autumn of 1941, Eddie will be sitting in a French country house with German officers teaching him Morse code, demolition, parachute landing, and how to swear convincingly in 3 German dialects. By the spring of 1942, he will read Berlin newspapers over breakfast. By the autumn of that year, the Germans will think they trust him completely. In 4 months, on a dark Cambridgeshire night, Eddie Chapman will hang under a silk parachute and try not to break his neck on the frozen English ground. But first, he has to become a man the Wehrmacht is willing to invent. 3 weeks after the letter left St. Helier, 2 German military policemen unlock Eddie Chapman's cell at midnight, march him down the corridor in handcuffs, and put him into the back seat of a black Mercedes saloon. Nobody tells him where they are going. The car drives him to the harbour. A grey patrol boat takes him across the channel under blackout running lights to a small harbour on the Cotentin coast. A covered Wehrmacht lorry carries him south through the night across occupied France. By the next morning, he is in a chateau 10 kilometres outside Nantes that the locals call the Villa de la Bretonnière, and the Germans simply call the school. The man waiting for him in the drawing room is 50 years old, slightly drunk, and wearing a worn tweed jacket. He smells of brandy and pipe tobacco. He has the round, soft face of a parish priest and the eyes of a man who has already read every file in the room before Eddie walked in. Dr. Stefan von Groening, Abwehr Section 2, the most patient officer of military intelligence west of Berlin. Von Groening does not ask Eddie about the St. Helier safe. He asks him about his father, his mother, his Sunday dinners, his favourite racehorse, the first girl he ever kissed in Burnop Field. By 3 in the afternoon, they have moved on to brandy and stories about safes Eddie has cracked. By 6 in the evening, von Groening is laughing so hard he has to wipe his glasses. By the end of the first week, Eddie is calling him __, quote _0__, and meaning it. The doctor is calling Eddie __, quote _1__, and meaning that too. There is a real affection between them. It is going to matter later. What the doctor knows that Eddie does not know yet is that the Abwehr's record in Britain is a quiet disaster. By the autumn of 1941, every single German agent ever inserted into the United Kingdom has either been caught, executed, or quietly turned. Berlin does not know this. Berlin still thinks it has a network. Berlin still receives polite radio messages from agents who were hanged 6 months ago, or who are now sitting in semi-detached houses in North London reading the racing pages between transmissions. The system that runs them is called the 20 Committee, 20 in Roman numerals written as a double X, double cross. The British have built the most successful deception engine in the history of intelligence. They have built it on the bones of every agent the doctor has ever trained. The doctor does not know that either. He thinks his agents are working. He needs a new one. He thinks Eddie will be it. For the next 13 months, the school at La Bretonnière takes Eddie Chapman apart and rebuilds him. He learns Morse code at 35 words a minute. He learns radio repair. He learns invisible inks made from quinine, lemon juice, pyramidon, and a paste of crushed aspirin. He learns parachute landing on a thick coir mat behind the stables, jumps from a 5-meter wooden platform until both ankles bruise yellow. He learns to swear in 3 German dialects so convincingly that when an SS Hauptsturmführer comes through the chateau gate one Sunday morning and shouts at Eddie in Bavarian, Eddie shouts back in the same Bavarian, and the officer apologizes and walks on. He learns Abwehr cipher tables by reading the radio operator's open notebook over a single long afternoon while the operator was at lunch in the village. And he can still recite the leading block of the table 6 years later when British intelligence asks him to write it out. He also learns explosives. This is the part he already knows, although the Germans do not know that. He pretends to learn it for the first time. He sits in a basement lecture room while a Wehrmacht sergeant explains how to wire a detonator into a stick of plastic. He nods. He asks careful questions. The questions are calibrated to make the sergeant feel clever. At the end of the lecture, Eddie leaves the room, knowing more about the German fuse train than the sergeant does, because the sergeant has only ever read about plastic explosive in textbooks, and Eddie has been blowing London cinema safes since he was 20. By the spring of 1942, the doctor decides Eddie is ready. By autumn, the Abwehr has a target. The target is the de Havilland aircraft factory at Hatfield in Hertfordshire, 30 kilometres north of London. The factory produces the Mosquito, a twin-engined wooden bomber so fast that the only German fighter that can catch it is next year's model. Berlin wants the Mosquito production line gone. Eddie is the man who will switch it off. The mission brief is precise. He will parachute into the English countryside, walk to Hatfield, place a charge at the electrical transformer station behind the main assembly hangar, blow the transformer, and kill the production line for a month. For this, the Abwehr will pay him in the region of 100,000 Reichsmarks into a Berlin account, which is, in 1942 purchasing power, the price of 3 small apartment blocks in Stuttgart. The doctor pours brandy. They drink. The doctor calls him son. December 16th, 1942. Eddie climbs into the belly of a Luftwaffe bomber converted for parachute drops at Le Bourget airfield outside Paris. The pilot is 22 years old and visibly afraid. The aircraft crosses the channel at 600 meters to stay below British radar. At 1:55 in the morning, the dispatcher taps Eddie's shoulder twice. Eddie hooks his static line. He falls into England. The rest of that night has already been told. The hawthorn hedge, the lost teeth, the farmer at Apes Hall, the constable from Ely on a bicycle. What has not been told is the conversation that began 6 hours later in a quiet country house on Ham Common, on the southern edge of London, in a building the British called Camp 20. The man waiting for Eddie there is named Robin Stevens. The men working under him call him Tin Eye because of the monocle that never leaves his right socket, even when he sleeps. Tin Eye Stevens runs the most polite and the most thorough interrogation center in the war. Nobody touches anybody at Camp 20. That is one of his rules. The interrogation runs on intelligence, not on bruises. Stevens offers Eddie a fried breakfast and a cigarette. He lets Eddie speak first. Then he sets down a folder on the table. The folder contains the entire Abwehr cipher table Eddie memorized in Nantes, neatly typed up, dated 3 months earlier than Eddie's arrival. It contains the names of the 3 previous German agents who came through the same chateau, 2 of whom are now sitting in a house in Hendon, transmitting to Nantes under British supervision, and 1 of whom is buried in Wandsworth Cemetery. Stevens tells him this in the same gentle voice he might use to read a child a bedtime story. Then he asks Eddie a single question. Would Eddie rather be useful, or would he rather be hanged? Eddie thinks for an hour. He drinks 2 more cups of tea. He looks at his own hands for a long time, the hands that still have white scars across the knuckles from a Soho fight in 1937. Then he asks Stevens where the radio is. By the morning of the 18th of December, Eddie is sitting at a wireless set in the upstairs back bedroom of a red-brick semi-detached house at 35 Crespigny Road in Hendon, with an MI5 wireless specialist beside him correcting the rhythm of his keying. Captain Ronnie Reed has been a BBC engineer in another life. He now spends his evenings impersonating Eddie's Morse hand on behalf of the double cross section. Tar Robertson, the major who runs the double cross section at MI5, sits in the doorway, approving every word that goes out. The first message reads, "Arrived safely, sprained ankle, hidden in a barn near London, will reconnoitre target." The doctor in Nantes reads it the same afternoon and embraces the German radio operator, who has begun to like Fritzchen as much as the doctor does. Now the British have a problem. They have to make Eddie's sabotage real on the page, while leaving the de Havilland mosquito factory entirely undamaged. They have to convince a Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight that one man with a rucksack on the ground has destroyed a high-voltage substation. They call Colonel John Turner. Turner runs the British camouflage establishment from Sound City Studios in Shepperton. He has been building fake factories, fake airfields, and fake battleships out of canvas and plywood for 3 years. On the night of the 29th of January 1943, his men go in. They unroll painted tarpaulins across the roof of the Hatfield transformer house. They scatter chunks of blackened timber, splinters of charred paneling, 3 smashed papier-mâché transformer drums, and a careful drift of fine coal soot across the access yard. They place a torn hole in the roof of the powerhouse. They dig 2 craters in the soil with shovels and dust them with cinders. By dawn, it looks, from 1,000 meters up, exactly like one resourceful man with a rucksack of plastic explosive has done a competent night's work on a substation. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight crosses Hatfield at altitude in the first week of February. It returns a roll of photographs. Within a week, the photographs are on Dr. Stefan von Gröning's desk in Nantes. Von Gröning telephones Berlin. Berlin orders an additional payment to Fritzchen's account. He has just become the most successful Abwehr saboteur in the United Kingdom. He has also, technically speaking, never destroyed anything. Before the next part begins, a short word. If this story is holding you so far, please subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories surface from the shelf where everyone else left them. Now, back to Eddie. A cable from Berlin has just landed on the doctor's desk in Nantes. The cable says one thing only: bring Fritzchen home. The leadership in Berlin wishes to thank him in person. How does a British double agent step into the most secure compound of the Third Reich and walk out of it alive? And when the Iron Cross is pinned to his lapel by a man who would have him shot in a basement in any other version of his life, will the Safecracker from Burnip Field choose the medal he has earned, or the country that has, in every way that matters, paid him second. A grey morning in the port of Lisbon, late spring of 1943. Eddie Chapman walks down the gangplank of a British merchant ship called the City of Lancaster, carrying a single canvas suitcase, 2 suits of cheap Portuguese cloth, and a sealed envelope addressed to a man at the German embassy on the Rua do Pau de Bandeira. The British have arranged the entire passage. The Portuguese have looked the other way at the docks. The Germans, in Lisbon, embrace him as a returning hero. Within 4 days, he is in Madrid, in the back of an Abwehr car, riding north on a road that smells of pine resin and diesel. By the end of the week, he is in Paris, sitting at a corner table in the Hotel Lutetia, looking across at the doctor. The doctor has lost weight. His tweed jacket no longer fits. He pours brandy with hands that shake very slightly, the way a man's hands shake after he has been holding his breath for several months. He has been waiting for Eddie. Berlin has been telephoning daily. The doctor stands up. He puts his arms around Eddie. He says, in a voice quiet enough that the waiter cannot hear, that the Führer wants to see him next week. There is a medal. There is a celebration. There is 100,000 Reichsmarks in a Berlin account waiting for Fritzchen to open it. Eddie smiles. He says he is happy to oblige. He drinks the brandy. He thinks about how easy it would be to stay. The Berlin trip happens at the end of April. What exactly happens in that room is one of the contested facts in Eddie Chapman's life. The British post-war file says he received the Iron Cross, 2nd class. German records, where they survive at all, lean toward the Kriegsverdienstkreuz with swords. Both medals look almost identical from a distance. Both were pinned by a senior officer in a quiet ceremony in a Berlin office whose exact address has never been pinned down by post-war historians. Both made Eddie Chapman that afternoon the only known British civilian ever decorated by Nazi Germany. He bowed. He thanked the officer. He saluted in the polite way the school had taught him at La Bretonnière. He went out into the spring sunshine, lit a cigarette, and counted German staff cars on the Wilhelmstrasse until he could no longer feel his hands. He could, at that moment, have stayed. He had German money, a German girlfriend in Oslo named Dagmar Lahlum, whom he had met during the long, quiet months on the Norwegian coast where the doctor had hidden him after Hatfield, and a medal on his lapel that bought him a free table in any restaurant from Hamburg to Prague. Britain had paid him for 2 years of double work. Germany was about to pay him for 10 more. The simplest path from this hotel lobby led south, across the Pyrenees, into Spain, and from there to a comfortable retirement somewhere warm. He could have walked away clean. He did not walk away. In late June 1944, just over 2 weeks after the first V-1 flying bomb falls on London, Eddie Chapman climbs into the belly of a Luftwaffe bomber at an airfield outside Brussels. He is given a new identity, a new radio, a new packet of British £5 notes, and one new cyanide capsule, which he sews into the lining of his right cuff with the same dispassionate care with which he had once sewn shillings into the seam of a winter coat in Soho. The mission is straightforward. Walk to London. Sit on a hill. Watch the V-1 flying bombs come over. Write down where they fall. Radio Berlin every evening with impact coordinates. The Vergeltungswaffe needs feedback. Berlin needs to know if it is hitting Trafalgar Square or missing it. Eddie hits the English ground at 1:20 in the morning of the 29th of June, 1944, in a flat field outside Cambridge. The constable who finds him this time has been pre-warned by MI5, and stands politely to attention while Eddie brushes the dew off his trousers. By 4 in the afternoon, Eddie is back at 35 Crespigny Road, drinking tea with Tar Robertson with a fresh radio set on the upstairs table and a window open onto a garden where a thrush is singing. The men in the room with him are not the kind to discuss what comes next in detail. They sit. They look at a map of Greater London on which 2 coloured pins have been placed. One pin marks Charing Cross. The other pin marks a Croydon council estate. Between them, in 2 weeks, 296 V-1 flying bombs have come down. Almost every one of them has fallen short of Charing Cross. They are landing 6 to 10 kilometres south of the Thames. They are killing people in their kitchens in Beckenham and Bromley and Penge and Croydon. They are not, by any measure, hitting the targets the Berlin Programme Directorate believes they are hitting. If Eddie tells Berlin the truth, the Programme Directorate will reduce the V-1 fuel cut-off setting. The bombs will travel further. The bombs will land on Holborn, on St. Paul's, on the Bank of England, on Liverpool Street Station at 5 o'clock on a Friday. London will burn in a way it has not burned since the Blitz. If Eddie tells Berlin a lie, the bombs will continue to fall short. People in Croydon will continue to die in their kitchens, but fewer people in central London will die in their offices. The choice is a kind of arithmetic he has not had to do since the night, a decade earlier, when he calculated the load on a wad of gelignite stuck to a Brighton cinema safe. Only this time, the unit is not pounds and shillings. It is human beings, on streets he can see from the upstairs window. He sits down at the radio. He keys, in his careful Morse rhythm, a sentence that has been agreed, line by line, with the 20 committee. The sentence reads, "Impact points concentrated around Highgate, Hampstead Heath, Camden Town, north of King's Cross. Heaviest damage observed in northern suburbs. Recommend reducing range setting to compensate for overshoot." The doctor in Paris reads it the same afternoon. He embraces the radio operator. He calls Berlin.